LSU head coach Brian Kelly makes yet another massive addition to this coaching staff. And this is a tight end room I think is going to be stacked in 2024. I think it just got even better with this new staff addition.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also check us out on YouTube as well. You can watch in addition to listening to the podcast. It's Locked On LSU on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, and you'll get a notification as soon as new episodes of Locked On LSU drop. Today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off of your first purchase. Well, Brian Kelly has made some massive additions to the coaching staff. Of course, it started out defensively. You bring in Blake Baker as your defensive coordinator. You're bringing Bo Davis as your defensive line coach. Kevin Peoples coming in from Missouri to coach the edge rushers. You bring Corey Raymond back to coach the secondary. Huge moves. And then you transition offensively. Cortez Hankton and Joe Sloan were promoted, both the wide receivers coach and quarterbacks coach respectively, promoted to co-offensive coordinators. And there was a hole at tight ends coach. Now, Brian Kelly has now brought in a new tight ends coach, has named Slade Nagle from Tulane as LSU's next tight ends coach. Now, Slade Nagle has been at Tulane for the last 8 years. He served exclusively as the tight ends coach for the first 7 years. In this past year, he was kind of an offensive jack of all trades, coached the quarterbacks, was an offensive coordinator. He really just did a little bit of everything this past season for Tulane's offense, which I think is massive, because if you watched any Tulane this past season, you would have been really impressed with what they did offensively. Michael Pratt, Tulane's quarterback, threw for almost 2,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, incredibly efficient. One game that always sticks out to me is that Ole Miss game. They hosted Ole Miss this past year. Tulane narrowly lost to Ole Miss, and it was without their starting quarterback in Michael Pratt. And that's an Ole Miss team that, as we know, can put up some points. So I was really impressed with what I saw from Tulane. So now you're bringing in Slade Nagle from that staff. He's got deep Louisiana ties. He's from Lake Charles. He played at McNeese. He had a short stint at LSU. He was the special teams coach in 2009. And then, of course, has spent the last 8 years at Tulane. So he's a Louisiana guy through and through. And a few things that I like about this hire. First and foremost, you're bringing in a lot of experience with Slade Nagle. You're bringing in a guy who called plays for Tulane this past year, that has been coaching tight ends and the offense over the last 8 years. You have two really young, inexperienced, and first-time offensive coordinators in Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton. It will be nice, I believe, just my interpretation of the situation, for those two to have someone a little bit more experienced to bounce ideas off of, hey, you've been in this moment before, that you might feel ready to take on that role. But once it's actually your job and it's 3rd and 4 games on the line and you have to call the play that gets you the first down and keeps your hopes alive of winning that football game, that's a stressful position to be in. Now, look, I'm someone that has said it, and I will reiterate it. I don't like too many cooks in the kitchen. That's why I am anti co-offensive coordinator. I'm not anti Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton, but I'm anti anything, because I think it's really hard to coexist. But it will be nice, I think, for those two to almost have a mentor in Slade Nagle that's been around, that has connections to the program, without him almost like breathing down your back, that he's not a third co-offensive coordinator, that, hey, he's in charge of the tight ends. That's what he's going to take ownership of. But he is there essentially kind of, if they want as a mentor, somebody that has a little bit more experience in that offensive coaching room. The second thing is Slade Nagle is walking into an absolutely stacked tight end room. First and foremost, we know that Mason Taylor is coming back. And with the injury and the offense, kind of the scheme, what it was this past year, Mason Taylor really wasn't a massive focal point of the offense. I think with just the inherent differences between Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier, the fact that Garrett Nussmeier's legs don't pose nearly as much of a threat as Jaden Daniels did, I think that you're going to start to see the tight ends utilized a lot more, whether it's in the short passing game or in the run game. So I'm excited to see kind of how he continues to mold I now a very experienced player in Mason Taylor and how he is involved in this offensive scheme. How Slade Nagle, Joe Sloan, and Cortez Hankton, all three of them work together to get the tight ends more incorporated in the passing game. Of course, Markway and Ka'Morreun Pimpton, two that we didn't see again a ton of this past season. Of course, we saw Markway with the with a touchdown against Texas A&M, but they're two 4-stars going into their second year in the program, true freshmen this past year. Incredibly talented players that were highly recruited across the country. And then also, of course, you've got TreyDez Green. 4-star, 5-star, it changes all the time. Number 2 tight end in the 2024 class. He'll be coming in for his true freshman season. So that kind of is, you're working with 3 very close to clean slates. You got 3 impressionable and young players with a lot of room to grow, but with a massive foundation already built, just given their natural talent and their natural abilities. So I love the hire in Slade Nagle. I love that you're bringing in somebody with a lot of experience. And I love that you're bringing in somebody that has Louisiana ties, that has experience being at LSU. And another thing I do wonder is, Slade Nagle has a long history of working with special teams. I wonder how involved, if at all, he will be in special teams, whether that's as simple as just being involved, in game planning. I don't know if that's, could be as something as big as on game day he's working with special teams coordinators. I'm not sure. I think it would behoove Brian Kelly to tell Slade Nagel, like, yeah, like, let me see what you saw. Show me what you think that we can do better. Again, of course, he was special teams coach at LSU in 2009. So I think you're bringing in a really smart offensive mind, highlighted the most, I think, by Michael Pratt's season this past year at Tulane. You're bringing him in to coach up 4 really talented tight ends with, of course, varying amounts of experience that will have varying amounts of involvement in your offense for this season, but you're not going to have Mason Taylor forever. I would venture to guess this is probably your last season with Mason Taylor. How does he help shape the future of this tight end room with Markway, Ka'Morreun Pimpton, and TreyDez Green, while also making the tight end position an asset for this LSU offense, because we know how Brian Kelly has used tight ends in the past. All right, coming up next, one thing that I mentioned about Slade Nagle, I think is very, actually 2 things that I mentioned about Slade Nagle, I take that back, is applicable to this entire coaching staff. That all of these new hires on the coaching staff seem to have a few things in mind. And I think it'd be a clue as to how Brian Kelly wants to build this coaching staff and this program moving forward. And we'll get into that after just a few words from our sponsors. I want to tell you about GameTime. So, GameTime is a super fast and super easy way to buy tickets for all of the sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, musicals, anything near you. And right now, all users get $100 off when they buy a big game ticket with code Vegas100. I mean, if I was in Vegas with an extra $100, I guarantee you I'm going straight to whatever store has the prettiest, nicest new purse or new pair of shoes. And hey, it's got killer last minute deals as well. So, not just with your extra $100 to go to the big game to hang out in Vegas, you also know that you're going to get the best price, all in prices, and views from your seat. GameTime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. So one of my favorite things about GameTime is whenever you're looking to buy a ticket, it'll give you a 360-degree view of exactly where you're going to sit, what your view of the court or the stage or the field is going to look like. I mean, it is a totally transparent process. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Right now, all GameTime users get $100 off a big game ticket with code Vegas100. Terms apply. Just download the GameTime app and use code Vegas100, VEGAS 100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, don't worry about it. You can still use code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off of your first purchase. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, rolling along here on Locked On LSU. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. And speaking of the Locked On Network, very exciting things happening over at Locked On because we've just launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Slade Nagle from Tulane, who is the quarterback's coach, offensive coordinator for Tulane this past year, longtime tight ends coach, former special teams coach at LSU. He has been named as the next tight ends coach at LSU. So another addition to a coaching staff that Brian Kelly is building. And let me say, there is a whole heck of a lot of star power on this coaching staff. But there are a few clues, little cookie crumbs that I've picked up on. And I think it's been incredibly clear and obvious to me what Brian Kelly is prioritizing when building this coaching staff. There are two things in particular that I look at this entire coaching staff, not just offense, not just defense, but this entire coaching staff that Brian Kelly has built. Two things in particular that I think they all have in common and that I think is incredibly telling about how Brian Kelly wants to build this staff. First and foremost, they all have ties to Louisiana in some way or another. They all have ties to LSU in one way or another, like a Blake Baker. He coached at LSU in 2021. Bo Davis, he played at LSU. He started his coaching career at LSU. Kevin Peoples, no, he's not from Louisiana. He didn't coach at LSU, but he did coach at Tulane. He has a stint at Tulane. And also keep in mind, Kevin Peoples is incredibly connected to Blake Baker, that he was the defensive line coach when Blake Baker was the defensive coordinator at Missouri. So that's his Louisiana tie. Jake Olson, who is your your safeties coach. He was an analyst at LSU in that 2021 season, in which Blake Baker was also on staff, in which when Blake Baker was on staff, excuse me. And then of course Slade Nagle, who has incredibly deep Louisiana ties. He's from Lake Charles. He went to McNeese. He had a stint at LSU. He's been at Tulane for the last 8 years. Every single new addition to this coaching staff is connected to the state of Louisiana or LSU in some form or fashion. I think that that's big, especially since it's coming from a head coach that had zero association with the state of Louisiana and with the LSU program before he got here. When Brian Kelly came to LSU, he mentioned how it was one of his biggest, if not his biggest priority as the head coach at LSU to bring in-state talent back in state, to keep in-state talent in state, to lock down the state of Louisiana first and foremost, and then go out and find great talent in surrounding areas or across the country. Bringing in a coaching staff that has ties, that has connections to the state, only emphasizes his commitment to that intention and to that promise. The second thing that I think all, if not most, of these coaches have in common? Their job at LSU, their role at LSU, isn't necessarily a promotion, at least by title. Because, of course, Slade Nagle going from Tulane to LSU, that's inherently an upgrade. That LSU is a better and bigger football program than Tulane. I don't think that's a hot take in the slightest. So, of course, um, in terms of the program that you're going to, in terms of program recognition and brand, it's an upgrade. But in terms of title, that's not a promotion. Slade Nagle's going from offensive coordinator to tight ends coach. That's a demotion. Bo Davis. Texas is one of the biggest brands and has some of the most money of any program across America. And he's serving in the same role at LSU as he was at Texas. Now, Blake Baker, Kevin Peoples. Blake Baker is serving the same role at LSU. Now, it's similar to Slade Nagle. It's a bigger program. It's a better brand. It has more money. It has had more success, sustained success over the entirety of the program's existence. But still, Blake Baker is going to serve in the same role as he was at Missouri. Kevin Peoples kind of taking a demotion. He was the D-line coach at Missouri. Now he's going to coach the edge rushers. When I say any of this, I don't mean it in a derogatory way. It's just, you're not going from linebackers coach to DC. An obvious upgrade. To me, that means a few different things. First and foremost, LSU's probably paying a pretty penny to a whole lot of these guys to come. The second thing is, I don't think that you would make a lateral move or a demotion, at least in title, if you didn't want to be at LSU. If you did not want to coach at LSU, and also if you weren't making a pretty penny doing it, of course, that's absolutely a part of it. If you didn't think that LSU was a place that you could win, if you didn't think that it was a desirable place to be, then why leave? And I think the bigger and more important thing to me here is, look at all of the experience that you are getting on this coaching staff. Cortez, Hankton, and Joe Sloan. Now, their experience level, it's not very robust, and the resumes are not incredibly long. So they are probably the exception. But Bo Davis and Kevin Peoples are regarded as two of the best defensive line coaches in the country. I mean, Slade Nagle has been a coach for the past 15 plus years. I mean, Blake Baker already has SEC defensive coordinator experience. Kevin Peoples has been a coach for 20 plus years? You're bringing in a lot of years of experience and a lot of expertise on this coaching staff. All of those things are incredibly valuable, especially considering the supplementary factor that will add for your two young co-offensive coordinators. So I think it's clear to me that Brian Kelly wants to build this program with the foundation of Louisiana. That if you spent time in Louisiana, if you went to LSU, if you coached at LSU, that's important to have a background in the state. And the second is a lot of experience. It's important. And I think that Brian Kelly has just shown a masterclass in building a coaching staff. All right, coming up next, I can't help but laugh. A little bit of news that came out about a former LSU player, Kayshon Boutte. What does that mean for LSU? We'll get into that coming up next. All right, I want to tell you about FanDuel. All right, with FanDuel, the NFL regular season has wrapped up. We've got the NFC and AFC title games coming up on Sunday. So right now is the perfect time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Plus, the app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live games, live same game parlays, You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays and my personal favorite way to bet. And there is so much more on FanDuel. So visit them at fanduel.com/locked on. Again, that is fanduel.com/locked on. And new users will get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. And all you have to do is place a $5 bet. Check out FanDuel. Make that first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, rolling along here on Locked On LSU. So this was a wee bit of an unexpected bombshell that came across our desks on Thursday afternoon. And it was the news that Kayshon Boutte, of course, former LSU wide receiver, has placed 9,000 bets over the span of 1 year underage and while using a fake name. And several of those bets that Kayshon Boutte placed in that time period, while they were all illegal, several were on college football, some were even on LSU, some even on himself. So, pretty big news there. And Kayshon Boutte was booked in EBR Parish Jail because of betting underage and because of using a fake name. And the advocate Wilson Alexander had a great breakdown with a ton of information as to exactly what the court records and what the legal proceedings had to say about it. There was one in particular, and I understand that this is a big deal, and I probably shouldn't laugh, but I couldn't help but giggle. So there were two bets that Kayshon Boutte placed on himself. One was part of an 8-leg parlay in the Florida State game, and of course, the Florida State game, very infamously, not a great day for Kayshon Boutte. It seemed like every single ball that came his way ended up on the ground. But this says in this Advocate article, again, Wilson Alexander did a fantastic job. It says Boutte bet that he would score a touchdown and get at least 82.5 yards against Florida State in the September 4th, 2022 game. He did neither. And that is correct. He did neither. All right. So when I first heard this, before I saw Wilson's breakdown, when I just saw that Kayshon Boutte, that this was what was going on with Kayshon Boutte, my first thought was, oh no, I hope this isn't a point shaving situation. I hope this isn't a game fixing situation. That was my biggest fear, and unfortunately, but I mean, let's be real here. That was my first thought based off of this reporting by Wilson. It sounds like that was not necessarily the case. In terms of what this means for Kayshon Boutte, there could be more things that come out. It could have more incriminating evidence. It might not. I believe he posted bail, so he's been released from East Baton Rouge Parish Jail. But my bigger thing here now is, what does this mean for LSU? Kayshon Boutte was the one that was gambling underage. Kayshon Boutte was the one that was using a fake name to place these bets. Those are all his crimes. I mean, I don't, when somebody commits a crime, how frequently is the football program going to be held liable, especially when that player is no longer with the program? So I do wonder, will there be any repercussions for this, like with the LSU football program? And in this breakdown by Wilson, the university released a statement, said, hey, we've been aware of this since July of 2023. Ever since then, we've been working with law enforcement. And to their knowledge, no other football player on the team at that time was involved, or now was involved in any sort of illegal betting practices. So I don't know to what extent or if LSU football could be held at all liable for this, if there's going to be any sort of involvement with the NCAA, if there's no evidence of Brian Kelly or any members of the coaching staff of having knowledge of Kayshon Boutte doing this, of making bets and placing bets illegally, then I don't know how they can be held liable. But also with the NCAA, you never know what they want to kind of put their big old nose into. It's a shame for Kayshon Boutte. It just seems like for the last year plus, it's odd story, incriminating story coming out. Whether it was rumors of what happened in the SEC championship game, him announcing he was coming back to LSU, and then very quickly pivoting and very hastily declaring for the NFL draft. It's been an odd and unfortunate series of events with Keishawn Boudias over the last year, and I'll even go back to 2 years of really underwhelming season for Keishawn Boutte. First and foremost, as far as he's concerned, I hope that he's okay. I hope that he has everything that he needs taken care of. If he needs any sort of help, I hope that he's getting that help. But really, for me, as long as LSU football is in the clear and there's not going to be any further investigation into what went on in the locker room, that's really the biggest thing for me. But I think this is just kind of a heads up and a wake up call that getting in trouble for gambling and for betting is so dumb. It's something that we saw in the NFL. Calvin Ridley was the first one to come out. He was suspended for a year for gambling on the NFL. And there were several more players that came out. Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions was one of them. Several players, it was revealed, broke the league's gambling policies. And it is something that is so avoidable and so unnecessary, especially now that players in college football are making NIL money. It's not like you need to gamble to make money. So it's something that I hope doesn't extend any further than this. But Wilson, some of Wilson's reporting, very good reporting, did give me just a wee bit of a giggle. I don't know what'll come of it. I don't know if anything will come of it, but it's absolutely something that we'll keep everyone updated with as we move along here throughout the legal process. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Coming up on Monday's edition of Locked On LSU, could we see even more staff changes? Not just coaching staff changes, but front office changes as well. We'll get into that on Monday's edition of Locked On LSU.